Good afternoon, everyone. We will now hear from Andy and John as they provide an overview of how COVID-19 has impacted Cheshire and Warrington, what they've been able to offer to support the fight against COVID-19, and how this compares nationally and internationally. They will also consider what industry might look like after lockdown. Again, don't forget to use the live chat facility next to the video player to get your questions now to the team.
My name's Andy Hume. I'm Head of Policy and Strategy at Cheshire and Warrington Local Enterprise Partnership. That basically means I'm responsible for the ongoing development and maintenance of the LEP's long-term policy and strategy position. So that includes things like energy, clean growth, science and digital.
I'm John Adlon. I'm the Growth Director at Cheshire and Warrington Local Enterprise Partnership. I look after all of the land and property projects for the local enterprise partnership. So that includes the Cheshire Sounds Corridor Enterprise Zone. It includes action in town centres to revitalise town centres, and it also includes looking after sub-regional housing as well.
Probably important to remember from the start that economies are complex things. They're all interconnected, so there are lots of different moving parts to it. In terms of COVID-19's impact on Cheshire and Warrington, certainly from a business perspective, it's been quite extensive. So from the businesses that we've spoken to, pretty much 100%, 98% of those who've responded to the surveys that we've done have said that in some way they've been impacted by COVID-19. And that can be in terms of shops and offices have been forced to close, and people struggling to get hold of goods and services that they might sell. So some of the manufacturers in Cheshire and Warrington have been impacted because they've not been able to get parts from other parts of the world. People have been impacted as well, clearly. Lots of people who work in those shops and manufacturers aren't able or haven't been able to continue their job in recent weeks. So they've been furloughed and sort of are waiting for things to open back up again as well. And clearly there's been an impact on young people and learners as well, with schools being closed and colleges and universities being closed as well. In terms of what that means economically, it might be a little while until we actually know exactly what the answer is. But we can draw some conclusions on what's happening nationally in terms of some of the areas that are get hit hardest. So retail, hospitality, the visitor economy in particular have been hit very hard. But actually some parts of the economy are doing quite well, if you can say such a thing. Things like life sciences, because we've got real strengths on life sciences in Cheshire and Warrington. And so one of the 3 testing labs that's been set up to try and establish if people have got COVID-19 is based at Alderley Park near Macclesfield. And that's because there's lots of scientists and technicians and academics that have lots of knowledge and experience and ability. So we've been able to support the opening of that, what I think it's called the Lighthouse Lab at Alderley Park. And other things like logistics have been doing quite well as well, because everyone's been ordering stuff online and being delivered directly to the door as well. So in terms of helping fight COVID-19 and minimise the damage and the impact to the economy of COVID-19, we've been doing lots of things initially in what we've called the response phase. And a lot of that is providing advice and guidance to businesses that have been affected by COVID-19. It's working with other partners like local authorities to help get grants and money out to businesses. So across Cheshire and Warrington, our 3 local authorities have paid out, getting on for £170 million of grant support to a range of small businesses, and particular businesses in the retail and hospitality sector. We've also been trying to boost the availability of skills training. Clearly there are people who are furloughed that it's an opportunity for some to be able to improve their skills. So for the likes of the Accelerate programme, which really concentrates on digital and STEM skills, we've made that available to support people during COVID-19. And we're now starting to plan, as the government has announced that lockdown is starting to be eased and businesses are starting to try and get back to normal in schools as well, working to provide that advice and guidance as best that we can to help businesses understand what they have to do to make sure they can keep their employees safe when they open, and make sure that their customers can also stay safe as well. And there's lots of practical things that need to be considered and thought through. So lots of other places are doing similar things. So it's also bringing in that learning as well and sharing that as best we can.
I think just in terms of the fight against COVID-19, I think what we've been able to do, as Andy said, is to react very quickly in terms of immediate kind of support to businesses to make sure that businesses are able to survive during the lockdown period. But certainly in my role, I'm starting to look at the longer term impacts of COVID and what we can do as a local enterprise partnership. And I think we've got a really strong economy in Cheshire and Warrington, a very diverse business base. So hopefully, our businesses can weather the worst of the COVID storm and come out the other side. And what we're trying to do now is then put in place support measures to stimulate the economy again, to get businesses back open, as Andy said before. But certainly in my role, what I'm trying to do is to attract new businesses to come into Cheshire and Warrington, to retain those businesses and help them expand. So we're putting investment into employment sites, we're putting investment into the Cheshire Science Corridor. We've already got a pipeline of new offices, labs and industrial units ready to go as soon as developers are ready to start building again. And we are putting a lot of investment into our two big growth corridors, so the Cheshire Science Corridor growth corridor and also the HS2 growth corridor from Crewe up to Northwich. And that's a series of employment sites that we'll invest in over the coming years. And that'll be around helping developers and businesses to build new factories, new labs, and new energy production as well. And I think that's the other important thing is supporting the move to the zero carbon economy. And again, Cheshire's very well placed to kind of go green. We've got a very large, strong energy production in the region. And we've got some really exciting initiatives around the UK's first carbon neutral industrial zone in Ellesmere Port. I think industry is going to look very different after COVID. And if you think about the kind of workplace going forward, certainly COVID's going to impact hugely on the way we work in offices. Probably most of all. So, we're going to have to put social distancing rules in place in the workplace. We don't know how long those social distancing rules will be in place. It might be for a long time. There's going to be a lot more health and safety in the workplace. There'll be a lot of employers and office developers are already starting to think about how offices can go keyless, how you can avoid touching surfaces as much as possible. So see more automated doors, we'll see more automated taps, hand dryers, soap dispensers. I don't know if anybody's been to some of the very modern offices that I go to. They've already put in place taps and soap dispensers that you just wave your hands under. You don't have to physically touch the tap or the dispenser. So I think there'll be a lot of emphasis on health and safety and cleanliness in the workplace. And also, but I think we'll do a lot more working at home. So I think this lockdown period has demonstrated that a lot of people can do their jobs at home. And I think particularly people who work in offices are able to kind of work at home now with remote technology and with computers and things like Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So we've all had to get used to working and doing team meetings over video. So I think that's going to be here to stay for the long term. I think people have realised as well that they don't necessarily need to commute into the office every day. They might only go into the office 1 or 2 days a week. I think that will change the way that companies operate and work a lot. So I think there'll be a lot more social activity via kind of video interaction. In the LEP, we have daily coffee breaks where everyone kind of meets over Microsoft Teams and things like that. So I think employers will start to kind of try and figure out how they can bring their employees together, kind of over the internet and over Zoom. So I think it's going to change hugely in terms of offices. I think it will have an impact on factories and industrial units as well. So we're already seeing the likes of Bentley and Vauxhall are kind of reopening now, but they've had to rejig their factory lines to make sure that they've got social distancing in place and the 2-meter rule between people. So I think people are going to be a lot more conscious of that. And then I think, as Andy said before, we've got a very strong life sciences sector in Cheshire and Warrington, and I think that will be very important going forward. COVID is the kind of first big pandemic we've had for 100 years, but we expect to see more of these kinds of viruses going around. So there'll be a lot of jobs coming up in life sciences, I think, for the foreseeable future. And as I say, Alderley Park and Cheshire are very well placed to support those roles. So if anyone's interested and thinking about a job in life sciences, now's the time to get into it. I think COVID has had a big impact obviously on retail and shopping and town centres, and town centres and the high street generally were struggling before the impact of COVID, as we kind of shifted generally onto online shopping. So there was a lot of issues with the retail industry, and some big retailers kind of gone bust before COVID. So we were already working to reimagine the high street and rethink town centres and how they work. And we're seeing town centres generally shift more away from retail and more to a focus on leisure and also living. So more people moving back into town centres, especially young people. And I think after COVID, that trend will accelerate. So I think some retailers might struggle to come back from this virus. And I think what we'll end up seeing is kind of a quicker move, an acceleration of a shift towards the use of town centres for retail, for leisure and for living.
I think in terms of the impact that COVID will have on industry in the future, it's driven lots of changes in the way that people work and learn. Part of our job is to understand which of those changes will stick, and also what we need to do, what might be needed in terms of infrastructure and other support to actually help those changes gain sort of traction, and what skills people might need as well, sort of as John suggested before. So whereas pre-COVID, in terms of investment in infrastructure, we might have talked about roads and railways. In the future, it might be more of a focus on digital infrastructure to underpin that shift to home working, to digital learning. It's also driven more quickly some of the changes that we might have expected to happen anyway. It's provided a real shock to the economy, and shocks can bring about quite transformational change sometimes. So the pace of life will be different as well, I think, moving forwards. People have had a sense of what it's like to have a different way of working and living, and a lot of people want to hold on to that, I think. And industry, to some extent, will also have to adapt to that. There's also likely to be big impacts in terms of international travel and international trade. Cheshire and Warrington as a sub-region, its businesses are very outwardly facing. So we do a lot of trade with China, we do a lot of trade with the United States. A lot of the companies that have had to close down temporarily, as I mentioned earlier on, that's been because their either markets abroad or the places where they buy their goods and services from abroad have been closed down as well. So there'll be changes potentially in where we look to source some of our goods and services, which again will stimulate new innovation and new opportunities in the economy.
Thank you, Andy. We hope you enjoyed day one of COVID-19 Response Week. Don't forget to use the live chat facility 24/7 to ask your questions, and check out the resources tab as well on this page for more information. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. for day 2. In the meantime, stay safe and stay connected.
So the Pledge is a sort of organisation that tries to connect young people with businesses. So we work with schools and colleges and different organisations, so different charities and everything as well, to get young people engaged with us and into the workplace.
We got involved with the Pledge probably 3 or 4 years ago now. We went along to one of the first meetings and it was actually really exciting. There were a lot of people there from local schools and local businesses. So from our perspective as an employer, it was great to sort of connect with local Macclesfield businesses, really.
The Pledge has been able to give me more confidence in myself. I think I've really been able to get on well with my employer because I've seen other employers being engaged through the Pledge.
I think it was in year 11, Jeva came in and did an assembly about the Pledge there. And that's when I first kind of properly, I'd heard bits about it, but that's when I first properly got an idea of what it was, and it was like that connection between schools and the workplace and demonstrating you can do more than uni and all that kind of thing.
I think it's important just to let us know the opportunities that are out there, because it's really hard to kind of find everything, because UCAS has a website for universities and employers don't really have one website, so Pledge can kind of be that bridging the gap.
They've put us in contact with countless local schools and charities and organisations. They approach us constantly to get involved in careers workshops and events that they've set up. They allow for meaningful contact.
Employing young people really helps us in terms of the energy that they bring, fresh ideas and being very committed to the organisation, and also they've got that enthusiasm for training and development, which will really help us further down the line.
But it's what you need to do. If you need young people and new talent, you've got to go out and get it, because the students and the children are struggling to come to you. So you've got to show them that you're approachable and that you can do something that sort of means something to them.